What Colors Your Parachute is a self-help book by Richard Nelson Boles, intended for job seekers. It has been in print since 1970 and has been revised annually since 1975, sometimes substantially. Boles initially self-published this book. It has been commercially published since 1972 by 10 Speed Press in Berkeley, California. As of September 28, 2010, the book is available in 22 languages and used in 26 countries around the world. Over 10 million copies have been sold worldwide. It is one of the most highly regarded career advice books in print. It also recommends carefully figuring out what one is best at and what one enjoys most. To sum it up, after the military, Boles goes to college to be a chemical engineer and finishes at the top of his class. Then he goes to Harvard and majors in physics. Does very well there. His next life-changing event is when he hears a sermon one Sunday morning and feels the call to ministry. So he attends the Episcopal Seminary in New York City and graduates. And for 18 years, Boles is the pastor of a church in San Francisco, California. Then along came the Civil Rights Movement, in which Boles actively participated, along with other ministers. But the church frowned on this, and after 18 years, Boles was fired. Boles then joined the United Ministers of Higher Education, where his position was to counsel college chaplains who were being let go of their position, simply because colleges across the United States had decided it was no longer important for chaplains to be on campus. Now, that's not all colleges, but a lot of them did. Boles uses his experience as a former minister. He recalled parishioners often came to him when they were tired of their jobs and would make this statement: "I'm tired of the way I'm being treated. I don't like what I do. I hate going to work. I am going to bail out." Boles, being a humorous person, would often ask, "Well, if you're going to bail out, what color is your parachute?" Henceforth, being fired from ministry after 18 years led Boles to writing an all-time bestseller which has stood the test of time for over 40 years. There are many books and sayings which derive from Boles writing his book, What Colors Your Parachute, such as, "Do what you love and the money will come, and find work you love and you will never have to work another day." I'm going to tie in what the Bible has to say about our occupations, but let me give you a couple more quick examples. Also, let me say this: today's message is just as much for adults as it is for graduates. When I was being inducted into the military, they gave me a test to see what I was best suited for. There are similar tests on the internet today. However, they really didn't consider the important factors. I never will forget the sergeant coming out of the room with my test results and handing them to me and said that I had scored 100 on auto mechanics. So he says, "You are best suited to be a mechanic." Truth was, I had no desire to be an auto mechanic. I had scored 100 on this test because I grew up very poor and we had to work on our own cars. This test did not take in consideration my impatience and troubleshooting abilities. For instance, the car turns over and will not crank. I check the gas gauge, and if it has gas, that's about it. Psychologists say there are two kinds of people when it comes to occupations. One group is classified the river people. These people are born knowing exactly what they want to do in life. Nurses, doctors, teachers, artists, musicians, they just seem to know. Others, however, fall into a category called goals people. They work hard to achieve a certain goal, and that's it. They move on. They take the position of been there, done that, and I'm moving on to something different. This world needs both. There's a third consideration which we should look at, and that's what the Bible has to say about choosing our life's work, and that is God's will for our life. Something career books and personality tests do not take into consideration. You may have read this verse of scripture before, but not really noticed its true meaning. Matthew 25:40 says this: "And the king shall say unto them, Verily I say unto you, inasmuch ye have done it unto one of the least of these, my brethren, you have done it unto me." The The message God is trying to convey here is our life's work should be one that includes service to others. Caroline Kennedy, daughter of President Kennedy, once said that one of the things that she remembered about her father most before he was assassinated was he told them they should always choose work which is in service to others. And according to Matthew 25:40, when we serve others, we are serving God. We should not get so caught up when we choose in our life's work that we only choose work which is self-serving. By self-serving, I mean choosing work simply because it pays the most money or gives us the most recognition. Most often, this work is powered by our ego and desires only for earthly things. Certainly, we need to provide for our family, for ourselves. We need to provide for others, but we also need to find a way to be in service to others. It's only through service to others that we are allowed to demonstrate our faith and love for Jesus Christ. A few years ago, we were eating at one of these Japanese steakhouses. We were seated at one end of the table. A young man who had already been seated at the table with his wife about halfway down, one had to notice how cheerful this young man was as he worked his way around the table asking each person where they were from, what they did for a living, if they had children, how long they'd been married. It wasn't long until every person seated at our table knew something about the other. So finally, I had to ask him about himself. This is what I found out. Two of the couples on each side of him had attended college with this young man. Once every couple of months or so, just to keep in touch with each other, they would meet and have dinner together. Then I asked him, what did he do for a living? He smiled and said, well, after I finished college and got my degree, the economy was not so great. So the only job I could find was driving a uniform truck. My thought was, he continued, was to drive the uniform truck, deliver clean uniforms, pick up dirty uniforms until the economy picks up, and then I'll move on to something else. He smiled and then said, little did I know, after getting my degree, I would fall in love with the uniform business. And 5 years later, I'm still here. He continued by saying, I go to all these different businesses, meet all kind of people. I know them. I know their families. I know their children's names and ages, and they know mine. I work at my own pace. I take clean uniforms in, do a little bit of paperwork, bring dirty uniforms out, put them on the truck, and travel on to the next stop. The company I work for is a national company with great benefits, good health insurance, and plenty of time off, and a great retirement plan. The only way I will ever leave is they run me off. Now, it didn't take much longer before this young man brings this up. Where do y'all go to church? I had pretty much pegged him from the start as a Christian. Not only did this young man find a way to fall in love with his job that most people wouldn't care anything about, but he also found a way to build relationships that otherwise he would not have had. The first three ingredients needed to share Christ with others, he already had down pat. In service to others, building relationships, demonstrating his faith in God through the life that his customers saw him living. I cannot see a uniform truck pass on the road without thinking about Chip. That was his name. Let me ask you this question. If a man can take driving a uniform truck and build a massive network of relationships all over the state, which enables him to reach others for Christ, what could we do with the resources and opportunities we have been given? It all starts when we put serving God by serving others at the top of our list. Let me give you another verse about how important Jesus thought it was for us to learn to be in service to others. Now listen to this. John 13 verses 4 and 5. He riseth up from supper and laid aside his garments and took a towel and girded himself, and after that he poured water into a basin and began to wash the feet of the disciples and to wipe them with a towel wherewith he was girded. Now Simon Peter did not want Jesus to wash his feet, but Jesus told him this: if you do not let me wash your feet, you have no part of me. To which Simon Peter replied, not only my feet, Lord, but my hands and head as well. In other words, Simon Peter wanted all of Jesus that he could get. Church, are we getting the big picture here this morning? If you want others to have a part of us as Christians, we can only share that by serving them. Let me say it again. If we want others to have a part of us as Christians, we can only share that by serving them. Do you know one of the ways of serving is by loving others? We serve our children by loving them. They receive a part of us. We serve our spouse by loving loving them, they receive a part of us. When we serve our friends by loving them, they receive a part of us. But let me state this last one because it's a biggie. When we serve Jesus Christ by loving him, he receives all of us. Amen. Graduates, let me say this. Don't stress too much about your vocation and what you should choose, and then worry about if you chose the right one and then change majors 3 times before you get to your senior year. Because then you spend 6 years getting a 4-year degree and your parents just can't afford that. And then when you land this job, it's not the job you thought it was, so you just move on to another job anyway. The average person after graduating college or entering the job market works 7 different jobs before they finally settle on something that they want to do. Or maybe they don't want to do it, they just tired of changing jobs. The job market is in constant change. If I would have told somebody when I graduated high school in 1971 that I wanted to be a network engineer, they would have thought I wanted to work on TVs or at a TV station. Because the first PCs didn't go on the market till 1977, and they were nothing more than glorified word processors. You go down to Radio Shack and get you a handy computer and type. The first battery-powered laptop did not hit the market until 1988. Now listen to this one. On January the 9th, 2007, Steve Jobs announced the iPhone at the Macworld Convention. Folks, that wasn't that long ago. How now do we live without iPhone? On the other hand, my grandfather once had a shoe business where he went door to door repairing shoes. He had all his shoe repair equipment on the back of his truck like a little mini shoe shop. I would dare say there's little call for his craft these days. People just go out and buy another pair of shoes. Folks, I say this because we don't just live in a world of change, but rather we live in a world of rapid change. The best advice I could give anyone, graduate or otherwise, is living in this world of rapid change is to develop a rock-solid base in which changes can be made from. Remember my friend who drove the uniform truck? His base or his foundation was anchored in his faith, fortified by getting a good education, and lived out through his attitude and his service to others. Zig Ziglar once said this: your attitude, not your aptitude, will determine your altitude. Another way of putting it is, it's not how much you know which will determine how far you go, but rather your attitude toward others at work and at home. Folks, we live in a me world. It's all what others can do for us. A music video just came out by Taylor Swift. You know what the title of it is? Me. Years ago, Janet Jackson had an album out, and this is what it says: what have you done for me lately? In the Bible, King Nebuchadnezzar was a me king. After God had blessed King Nebuchadnezzar with much, he decided to use these blessings to serve himself and not serve God and others. Daniel chapter 3, Nebuchadnezzar ordered a gold statue to be built of himself 90 feet high and 90 feet wide. He had it set up so people could worship the likeness of him. But in Daniel chapter 4, it describes how Nebuchadnezzar is humbled by God for boasting. He is stricken with insanity and lives like an animal for 7 years. In more recent times, many of you remember Saddam Hussein, a radical leader of Iran. He too was a me person and also used the resources of his nation to build a statue unto himself. That wasn't that long ago. After the Iranians were defeated in war, Saddam Hussein fled his lavish castle and was found sometime later living in a hole in the ground. He was tried, found guilty of many crimes, and hung by the neck. Let me say this and I'll close. Some of you probably asking the questions this morning: if I devote my life in service to God and to others, who is going to look after me? My friend, if you devote yourself to serving God and serving others, you do not have to worry about who is going to look after you.